You're listening to a podcast from 702 and Cape Talk.
702 and Cape Talk.
The Naked Scientist.
Hey Chris, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm a fan. That's how I am. Both me and my 11-year-old. And I get to talk to you today, Chris.
What's your 11-year-old's name?
Nati. Nkosi Nati in full.
Oh, how wonderful.
And he's in grade
a scientist
5.
in the making.
So, yeah. Okay, he really does some experiments, and at the other time he almost burned the house down between you and I. My husband doesn't know about this, even though
he's destined for greatness then. I did that.
Chris, it's great to chat to you, and we've just finished with our open lines, but I'm going to invite you, callers, to call in and talk to our naked scientist. Now, Chris, I believe that you've uncovered this, what's called a vacation cold, basically where people, when they go on holiday, they just tend to get sick and they catch a cold. And talk to us why. I mean, when you go on holiday, you think that's where you're going to be resting, where you have, time to recharge and reboot. Talk to us about the basis of the vacation's colds.
Yeah, it's a common phenomenon. People say that they work themselves to death in the office for months at a time. They never get ill, and then they have a day off or they go off on holiday somewhere and they immediately succumb to something. And our scientists at Cambridge University think that they know at least part of the reason for this, which is that your body clock, which is it's a genetic domino effect going on in all of your cells in your body, which keeps time. Every cell in your body effectively knows the time of day because there is this genetic sequence ticking away in the cells where one gene turns on another gene and that turns on a third gene which turns off the first gene and so on. This genetic clock, the body clock, actually dictates how your cells work and how metabolically active they are. And the idea is that they prepare your body to meet the metabolic demands of the day ahead. So when you wake up in the morning, it turns up very hard, and when you go to bed at night, it turns down your metabolism so you can sleep. And what the scientists at Cambridge, this is Rachel Edgar and her colleagues, have published in the journal PNAS this week, is that when you infect cells at different times in the body clock cycle, they are much more or less susceptible to virus infection. Now, they did this in mice, and they also did it in cells in culture, which also have a body clock ticking in them. And what they found is that when the mice were infected at one time of day, the equivalent of when the mice would be going to bed, the mice were much more susceptible to being infected with the herpes virus, a glandular fever equivalent, or flu viruses, than mice that were just getting up to meet the challenges of the day. And they found that if they disrupted the body clocks of these mice, in much the same way as when you go on an aeroplane and you fly off on holiday across time zones and get jet lagged, that sort of body clock disruption, the mice got much sicker and had greater spread of the viruses than when they were infected, when they were much more geared up to meet that challenge. And the researchers also say, as the year goes on, the reason that probably you get more infections in wintertime is that one of the genes in the body clock which guards against and gives cells resilience against infection, a gene called BMAL1, the levels of that relative to the other genes drop off in wintertime. So it all fits together. So it's the disruption to your body clock that makes you more susceptible to infection. So getting jet lagged is probably part of the equation when you go away and unfortunately succumb to something straight away.
Right. All right. Thank you for that, Chris. I mean, you're a super genius. That's all I'm going to say. We have Tony from Krugersdorp who would like to pose a question to you. You've got a plethora of callers coming in here.
Very quick question. I was driving in my car the other day and I had an insect on my dashboard, a flying insect, obviously, which took off while I was moving. I'd just like to know why that insect wasn't flung to the back of my car, seeing as there's basically nothing but the air in the car to hold it in its place.
Hi, Tony. I presume that you had a car that was enclosed. It wasn't an open top like a cabriolet.
No. It was definitely enclosed. How it got in there, I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, if you're driving along in an enclosed car, windows are done up and there's a bit of aircon on to make sure that you're nice and cool in your car. But other than that, there's not really much air movement in the car. So when the car goes along, the air that's inside the car is a sealed mass of air, effectively, and that's being accelerated at the same time as the car, because the car pushes on the air molecules, they have a bit of inertia, and they slowly are accelerated. But once that's the case, then you've just got random movement of the air in all directions inside the car. So relative to the insect, the air is just not moving any more than if it were sitting on the ground outside the car. So that's why it doesn't actually have this effect of suddenly being flung to the back of the car, because it's in contact with a body of air which is itself in contact with a car which is being accelerated or has been accelerated to the same speed as the moving car. That's not to say the air inside the car can't move, and a really interesting experiment if you want to try this, everybody, but make sure you do it not on the public road because it could be dangerous. Get a helium balloon, which you get at fairgrounds and things, put it in the back of your car and drive forwards and then stop by putting your foot on the brakes very suddenly. Ask people, what do you think the helium balloon will do? Most people will say it will stay in the back of the car. You'd be surprised to see that actually the balloon will come cannoning forward and hit the windscreen of the car. And the reason for this is that the helium weighs less than the air does inside the car. The car stopping suddenly means that all of the air rushes or effectively slams into the back window of the car, and the helium balloon, being light in the air, is pushed to the front.
Thanks, Chris, for that. Let's just quickly take an ad break.
702 and Cape Talk.
The Naked Scientist.
We're back with the Naked Scientist, and we're taking your calls. I have Carmen online now. Chris, Carmen has a question around the link between kidney infection and depression. Talk to us about that.
If I could just, first of all, just as I was talking about helium balloons, I realised when we were just listening to those adverts, I said stamp on the brakes, I meant stamp on the accelerator. Because when your car pulls away, all of the air is left behind inside the car a bit, which means it rushes to the back, and so everyone assumes your helium balloon is going to go backwards, and that's why it goes to the front of the car, because it floats on the air and the air is left behind inside the car cab. Have a go and see what you think, but don't do it on the public road.
Carmen is gone. We've lost Carmen, so we're going to take a call from Charles. Charles from Cape Town. Talk to us.
Hi, Chris. Macular degeneration.
Hi,
do you know if there's been any further progress in the treatment of macular degeneration other than taking lutein?
Hi, Charles. Yes. First of all, what is macular degeneration? Well, the macula is the most sensitive part of your retina, which is in the back of your eye, where you convert light into nerve signals that the brain can decode and show you what you're seeing. And in this region known as the macula, there is the highest density of photoreceptors, which are the rods and cones that convert light, photons, into electrical energy. And those rods and cones are nourished by a layer at the back of the eye, which is the retinal pigment epithelium, the RPE. And this provides them with nutrition. It cleans up debris, removes toxins, and just behind that is a dense network of blood vessels that make sure that there's enough fresh blood and nutrients to keep that process healthy. And there are two types of macular degeneration. One is called wet macular degeneration, and this is where blood vessels become leaky and you get hemorrhages and breakdown of material in the macula and you lose your central vision. Dry macular degeneration is where you don't have leaky blood vessels, but instead you lose your photoreceptors because the cells and tissue in that region begin to die off. Now, it's not a cure yet, but I was at a conference in Western Australia in Perth called Science on the Swan at the beginning of May, and a researcher called Lyndon de Cruz, who's at Moorfields Eye Hospital in London, presented some work he's been doing where they have developed a special repair patch for the back of the retina. And they are able to create this patch of healthy retinal pigment epithelium tissue, which they can slot in under the retina and restore the action of that nourishing protective layer at the back of the eye, which keeps your photoreceptors healthy. And they've been able to show that they can reduce the process and the rate at which macular degeneration progresses. And they're also able to restore some vision because it helps to clean up some of the damage that's already been done, which helps people to regain some of their vision. These are experimental tests that they're doing at the moment, but they are doing them on patients. They're doing clinical trials, and the results look very encouraging. So the answer is yes, there's every reason to be optimistic, and that's just one example of what researchers are doing to try and deal with a problem that will become much more common in future as more and more people live longer and longer.
Right, Chris, we did lose that call from Carmen, but please can you still answer that question? Now, Carmen's question was, what is the link between kidney infection and depression?
Well, I don't think there is a definite link, as in that one thing causes the other. But certainly it's true that any kind of ill health will make people suffer low mood. Kidney infections are very debilitating. They're uncomfortable, they make you feverish, and if you have fever, then you also have inflammation, and inflammatory signals from your immune system are also linked to feeling more miserable. And so I think probably the association there is that when you're unwell, you don't feel happy. But I don't think there's a defined thing where one causes the other. You can't say if you get a kidney infection, you will always be depressed. I think it's probably your personal psychological reaction to not feeling very well.
And we have Shirley from Johannesburg. Shirley, what's your question to Chris?
Hello?
Hi, Shirley, are you there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's Shirley speaking. Morning to you, Chris. Hello?
Morning. What would you like to ask?
Chris, I'm almost 80. And lately I've been sort of choking on my own saliva. It's very, very traumatic. I cannot get my breath. And when I'm alone, I beat the dickens out of my rib casing that I actually bruise it. But eventually I get my breath to cough and try and come right. Is there anything else you can suggest?
Well, obviously, if this is a new thing, Shirley, this is something that needs to be investigated, and a radio diagnosis is not a replacement for going to see a doctor who can have a look and make sure that there's not something important that's being missed or something has changed and that could be remedied. Obviously, as you get older, everything gets a bit saggier, and we also are more likely to get bits of saliva or mucus sticking in various places, and it might be that you need to just have a good cough, and because you've got a bit older, it's harder to cough as hard as you would have done when you were younger and dislodge obstructions and things, and it may be a range of those factors. But I would certainly, if this is a new thing that's happening abruptly and it's happening more often and it's worrying you, you should go and see a doctor, because there may be some other thing that can be remedied there, and then you'll get some relief.
Thanks, Chris, for that. I have a question of my own, Chris. Now, I recently read about the uncanny valley. Talk to us about that.
I've never heard of uncanny valley, unless that's the thing that you're referring to, where it looks like a car is going downhill it looks like a car is going uphill when in fact it's rolling downhill. Is that what you mean?
No, it's apparently robots who resemble humans because of a sense of unevenness and something to that effect. So when I Googled that, I thought, okay, this is one that I need to pose to Chris.
I've never heard the phenomenon. If anyone can enlighten me, I'd be grateful. I mean, we do make things in our own image, because if you make things that look like us, then the theory goes that people are going to be more comfortable hanging around with machines that we can identify with and look more friendly to us. But, I mean, other than that, I can't speculate.
Thanks for that, Chris. There's a call from Paul from Durbanville. Paul, do you want to pose your question to Chris?
Yes, thanks. Hello, Chris. My question is this: as a boy, can you hear me?
Yes,
yes, I can. Go on, ask the question.
Oh, great. Yeah, as a boy watching westerns, you'd see these buggies being drawn by a horse, and the wheels would be going clockwise, but the spokes appeared to be going counterclockwise. And this is still a phenomenon in today's movies. Why? What is the cause of that? Why do the spokes look like they're going in the opposite direction of the wheel?
Right, Paul, what you are witnessing is a stroboscopic effect. Those movies were shot with cameras which shot a certain number of frames per second. So let's just do the thought experiment. Let's imagine a wheel, and we're going to paint a spoke which is pointing upwards at the 12 o'clock direction with a big white blob so we can see it. So we'll imagine the TV camera, or whatever they're using, is, let's say it's taking 25 pictures a second. When the wheel first begins to move, the spoke, with our white spot on it, turns a little bit because the wheel is not moving very fast. So when the picture is next taken, the spoke will have gone from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And then the wheel speeds up a bit, and this time it goes from 1 o'clock, not to 2 o'clock, but to 3 o'clock. And then the next picture that's taken goes from 3 to 6 because the wheel's speeding up a bit more. But we're still okay because it still looks like it's going forwards. But now imagine that the wheel is going so fast that the picture is taken And instead of going from 1 to 2, it now gets almost all the way around and goes from 1 to 11 o'clock or round to 10 o'clock. And then it's going so fast that it goes all the way around and round again. So it's around at 9 o'clock. What you can imagine is that as the thing speeds up, it starts off going forwards. You can see it ticking around forwards, but then at a certain point, it's going to go so fast that between the snapshots that the camera takes, it will have gone all the way round and round again, and it looks like it's almost going backwards. And that's the reason why you see it speed up, appear to go backwards for a while, and then start going forwards again. And you can see the same phenomenon with modern-day cars on the road, because the street lamps are powered by mains electricity. This is at 50 hertz, which means there are 50 cycles of the electricity per second, and that means that the electricity is flicking the light on and off 100 times a second, because it goes plus minus twice a second. And that means that you get 100 glimpses a second of your wheel. So as you drive along the road in the dark, then you'll see that the wheel appears to be doing the same thing because it's being strobed by the street lights. So modern day cars will do it too.
Are you happy with that, Paul? Yeah, I'm sure you are. Now, I have Chris. Oh, I've just lost Chris from Rosettenville. Anyway, let's take a call. Well, I'm not going to ask that question because when I read it on the screen, I'm like, I'm not going to pose that question. But we'll hopefully we'll have Chris back online with that question. Chris, what other new inventions that are happening out there? And I have to tell you this because I've invited a friend of mine. She's a Martian, and she's training to go to Mars in 2026, Dr. Adrienne Moret. And when we went to a women's summit in Mauritius just a couple of weeks ago, and when she said she's going to Mars, I said, why? Why do you want to go to Mars? And she actually has no qualms, by the way, that she might not even come back. She's made a decision not to have children. So she's going to be online with us just after the news. And before that, but I would like you to help me as a layperson. What happens in Mars? I know there's nothing that grows there for starters. And we can just maybe, just tell us about Mars in leading up to our time with Adriana.
Sure. Where do you want me to begin?
Why would even people want to go to Mars? I even actually took the time to watch The Martian the other day with, what's his name? This esteemed actor. And it's because I'm fascinated that when people just want to do the out of the ordinary, go on a spacesuit and go and live in Mars. I mean, I just want to go on a cable cart to the Table Mountain. That's my mission in life. And so just talk to us about life in Mars.
Well, walking up Table Mountain is hard work, but it's not as hard as walking around on Mars, I can tell you that. And Table Mountain is infinitely more beautiful than Mars, which is a really nasty place. It's barren, it's red, the radiation is very high because there's no nice atmosphere and ozone there to soak up the ultraviolet, so you get very nasty levels of radiation there. And it's very cold. The temperature goes to many degrees below zero, and it just about reaches freezing point in the daytime. And it's not, therefore, a very nice place. There's nothing to look at apart from rocks and some valleys. But it is there, it's an important target, because to get there we have to breach so many technological barriers and physical barriers for humans. We've got to get fragile human beings on a 9-month space journey safely across space, where they're going to get radiation raining in on them. They're going to have all kinds of demands placed on their body. They're going to be floating around in microgravity, which is going to do nasty things to them. So we've got so many problems to solve that it is a really important thing to try and do this, because of what it represents. We have not done anything major in space, really, in the 40 years since Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And so it's about time we got ourselves in gear and broke down some of these barriers.
Wow. Chris, it's been an absolute blast hanging out with you. Thank you so, so much for your insights. You just, as I said, super genius. Great time hanging out with you.